What comes to your mind when you hear the word addict? Someone irresponsible, weak, dangerous, a burden on their family? Or is it a person who simply made bad choices? But what if the story is more complicated than that? Welcome to Uncomfortable Conversations with Debalina. In today's episode, let us explore the nuances of addiction as it transmutes a person to an altered state of mind. Let us explore addiction not as a moral failure, but as a deeply human experience. Because the truth is, addiction does not discriminate. It can affect the gifted student who once topped every exam, the sensitive teenager who felt emotions more intensely than others, the brilliant mind that never quite found its place in the world, the artist, the entrepreneur, the teacher, the parent. Many people who struggle with addiction are not lacking intelligence or emotional depth. Yet, those same qualities can make them more vulnerable to anxiety, loneliness, or a relentless feeling of not fitting in. For some, substances become a way to quiet a racing mind. For others, a way to numb unbearable memories. What begins as relief can slowly become dependence, and before they realize it, the person they once dreamed of becoming starts slipping away. Educational opportunities are lost, careers stall, relationships fracture, trust erodes, families suffer. The individual is often left carrying not only the weight of addiction but also the stigma, the societal taboo attached to it. Society tends to judge the final chapter while ignoring the pages that came before. In today's podcast, Uncomfortable Conversation, the topic we will be dealing with is the altered state of mind through the lived experience of a recovering addict, representing people whose lives have been touched by addiction. Let us explore the psychology, the family dynamics, the trauma, the recovery journeys through the lived experience. Because behind every addiction is a story, behind every statistic is a human being. And understanding that story may be the first step towards healing. I have an anonymous recovering addict as my guest today. Let's call him Varun, now an established product manager of a reputed organization, who will share stories as someone who has managed to steer away from this curse almost a decade back. Welcome, Varun.
Hi, Debalina.
So to start with, I want to get into the personal experience of you as a recovering addict. But what is addiction, or who is an addict according to you?
That's a tough one. The easy answer is the substance abuse part, where people do not have any control over their lives because of the single-minded obsession with substance. It could be anything. But in hindsight, I think it has a lot to do with the person that you are and the person that in your young days, the person that is constantly in a fight with yourself.
But anyone who tries out drugs cannot be called as an addict, right? Anyone who tries out substances doesn't reach the extent or the dangers that addiction entails. So is there a differentiation? Is there a clarity in that definition?
My knowledge is a very thin line because I had friends who probably used as much as I did, use drugs, but not every one of them is an addict. So for an addict, again, if you try and define it by the usage of the substance, you live for using, right? An addict would live from one high to the next, and the in between is spent on finding means and devices to go into the next high. But that is just the using part. But I think it's something about the addict is broken inside. It could be something in the mind, it could be something about the person that you are, your the way of thinking, something is broken which leads to that.
So is there a separate source of addiction you're talking about? Is there a void that drugs or the substance gives that is not available elsewhere? Is it something about that?
I don't know if you can generalize it that way. I can talk about my experiences. Like I could not fit in with the way with my friends, with my family. Constantly felt I was the odd man out. And when drugs came into the picture, I felt very much at home. Not just with the substance, but with the entire lifestyle. You are basically become a loner and you shun out your friends. And I became comfortable with that lifestyle.
Right. But were there signs of something deeper going on apart from that aspect?
At that age,
I don't know if this question makes sense, but
I don't know. At that age, I really was not aware of deeper things. See, in hindsight, I would say there was no other external factor which actually contributed to it. I was just built that way. I could, if when you're a teenager, you have a bunch of grievances towards your family. I had that. There was There were instances of girlfriends and breakups and the usual emotional drama that teenagers go through. I had my fair share, but so does everyone. Not everyone turns out to be an addict. So something was broken in me, and when I started using, it seems like the natural evolution of my life. It was like I suddenly began swimming in water, and I was meant to do that.
So, generally in Indian household, I'll talk more about Indian household because we kind of belong to Indian households. But isn't it a little difficult to honestly talk about pain or express yourself, especially as a man, if you're going through pain or the feeling of not being seen or feeling of not being acknowledged about the feeling that you are feeling? So does that have anything to do with it, or were there patterns of family chaos that contributed? I know you don't want to kind of blame within quotes, but I'm saying that there's always a fair share of nature and nurture both playing its part. So I know you are talking about your own dysfunctions, of course, but are there things that can be that people around you or people around addicts can be made aware of, which can be improved or which can be made aware of so that things cannot get back into that same pattern? So is there a family environment or the need to talk honestly about certain things important, or were generally missing in my family? So I would also want to know about yours.
Well, I mean, again, my family, I don't know, I don't remember much about whether it was an environment where I could, talk about my feelings. Obviously, growing up, like I said, the usual stuff that happens probably with a lot of families. But I don't think I can pinpoint an exact factor that leads to somebody being an addict. It's not a cause and effect. It's not a before and after. I don't think it's quite as simple as that. It just happens for some people. And people with family problems, chaos, feeling lonely, depressed, not all of them become addicts. So it's just the way the cards are dealt for some, and while others are spared. That's all.
But you've told me about the way your mind has worked in certain situations and the fact that you feel bad about emotionally manipulating your family members to get things done your way. Can you cite a few examples like that? Are there instances that you've done?
You mean while using drugs, while I
Yeah, of
was
course,
using?
yes.
Oh, yes.
Or maybe before, or maybe after. Does it end there or does it continue?
Well, it does. Like I said, it's something about me that's broken, and I am a selfish, manipulative person as a person. That you try and change that, but that's who I am. That's the basic blueprint on which I'm built, and I can probably trace this behavior to quite a few years before I became an addict. But during when I was using, there are no two ways about it, right? You are using drugs, and you would do anything in your power to get that next high, whether it's lying to your parents, whether it's stealing from somebody, whether it's breaking somebody's heart, all of it is done nonchalantly, really, without much remorse or guilt. Because those emotions are pushed far away. They are not so much of a priority. The priority is that you're a slave to something and you have to get that next high.
So, can you give some specific examples of such manipulations?
See, the biggest one I can remember is my father sent me some drugs to a different city. I was there in Mumbai for some time, and my father actually smuggled drugs to me in Mumbai, not because he wanted to, but because I manipulated him to.
Right. That's new. That's something uh, that Netflix can make a story about. All right, moving on from there. But generally speaking, I know again you don't want to blame anyone, but have there been the role of anyone enabling this habit, or is it all about you and what your priorities have been?
See, I don't know if you can call it enabling because there was also my manipulation involved. So I kind of established a story in my family, basically blackmailing them that if they try and make me stop using drugs, I would do something drastic. And by that, what I meant, I'm not really sure because I really didn't have any thought behind
What was
that.
the blackmail about?
The blackmail was, let me be, one day I will get out of this. But right now, if you try and force me, I will do something bad. Now, what is that bad? We no one know. But it's a middle class family. The parents love you, and I took advantage of that, the whole deal. And that's, I don't think that's enabling. It's just me playing everything right, and this went on for years. So it was like a very, and I did not hide. At some one point of time, I did not hide taking drugs. I was doing it openly in my house, and it was like well established. That's my life. Like there was the drugs paraphernalia beside me out in the open, and my mom would basically clean it up and set things right for me to use again. So I had established that kind of a situation in the household.
Oh, wow. And how did you finally break through that denial? Did you finally realize, and uh, what triggered something had to change?
Well, for everybody like me, if your rock bottom basically pushes through somehow.
Понимаю.
I lost while in another city. I lost my job. I lost my girlfriend, and I didn't have a place to stay. I was out on the streets for a few days, and basically those things make you realize that this is it's a self-destructive spiral. Either you got to stop or you're going to end up dead. And I actually have seen friends die. I know people who've died with this pursuit. So yeah, that
So
was.
it was more frightening to continue, or was it a scary thought imagining a life without drugs? Which one was more scary for you?
Oh, I think both were scary. Both were equally scary. I did not know by that time when I was in contemplating giving up this life and did not know how. By that time, I was scared about what would I do if I gave up drugs, because I did not know a life without drugs for a long, long time by then, and continuing to use drugs was obviously scary because it's all the things that you are made to do to use.
Right. But you have been a very good resource to your employers, from what I've heard in the background before. You've always been the perfect employee, and all your bosses have been pretty happy about your work. Did you not miss that part, or the fulfillment through work part? What was what was going on at that point, career wise?
Career-wise, I think I also was lucky because in those days, again, in quite a few of these offices, they knew about my substance abuse, and I kind of delivered the job. And I would do that because that was paying for my drugs, and I was very diligent about the job that I was trying to do. But it's a funny story. In one particular office, I used to go to the office at 12. Obviously, office starts at 10, but I would go in at 12. And before I went in, because that was a regular time, everybody in the office would basically visit the loo and get it done with. Because for the next 3 hours, the bathroom would be occupied. Because I would be in the bathroom using. So I basically started work at around 3. And I continued and did not speak to anybody because my assignments were set for me, and I didn't speak to anyone, and I continued working till about 11, and I closed the door behind me, and I used to score some stuff and go back home, and this went on for I think a couple of years. That was the one phase of my life. It was pretty funny, but then
And it now sounds funny, but it wasn't funny. It does. I don't think it was funny at that point.
no, but then the employers in those days, today probably they will just kick
Unimaginable.
somebody out
Yeah.
on the day one. But in those days, the employers didn't, I wouldn't say they didn't mind, but they just tolerated me because I was doing the job.
Right. Right. But at least I can see that I can imagine that your narrative has shifted from seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances at one point, and now you are owning up to your actions and taking responsibility, that saying that it's something inside me that that I was doing all of that rather than your external circumstances. So what does kind of recovery mean to you beyond staying sober? One thing I can see is taking responsibility for your actions, but apart from getting rid of the substance, what does recovery mean to you?
For me, the biggest challenge was trying to quiet the constant noise in my head, the constant awareness of somebody speaking in my head racing to make sense of the world without drugs. So trying to curb all that and get some sanity into my head. That was the biggest challenge. Obviously, if you're staying without drugs, you're staying without drugs, and after a point of time, it becomes a habit. In the beginning, you are tempted every day. It is difficult. It is extremely difficult in the beginning to just stay off drugs, but as days turn into months and months into years, it becomes a kind of habit, and then you get kind of the focus to figure out what can I change in me so that this becomes not so difficult. So some parts of your thought process, some parts of the person that you are needs to change, and you try and figure out the best way possible to make that happen. Because if you hold on to the person that you are, I would end up using again. There is no question in my mind. So I could not probably categorize in what way I have changed, but I do have changed. I'm a lot more at peace with myself now.
But what did your first few months of uh, clean days look like, or how was it? Can you recall? I know it's been quite a while, but can you recall your first few days of recovery?
Well, several things, I remember my family, my mother and father were very scared. They were obviously did not trust me much. If I went out to buy a cigarette, they would check me and usual things. Obviously, I was not trustworthy, so that's why they didn't trust me. And I did not have a job then, and it was basically trying to figure out what to do with the lone time without drugs, because suddenly there's total emptiness, there's total void, and it's like a pit that you're constantly falling into, and you do not have anything to hang on to. And at that point of time, nothing really matters, nothing really works. You try and listen to music, you try and write something, try and watch TV, try and read up a book. You cannot, I could not set my mind to anything for 5 minutes at a time. It was like constantly shifting. It was a constant spiral of machinery head going on in my head. I used to attend a recovery program, 12-step program as they called it, but that was for an hour. The rest of the 23 hours, I had to deal with it, and I ended up making new friends with whom at least I could spend some time. You have to figure out your ways, basically, trying to stay clean.
But I've seen you doing a lot of service related to recovery programs. Uh, but how has mentoring or supporting others have strengthened you? Does it also help in your journey of recovery?
It does, because at some level, you relate with the other person who's just got off drugs, and it's been years for me. But that kind of is a reflection for me to realize the way I was, and it's because somebody spoke to me that way when I was clean a few months. Somebody who had quite a few years, number of years recovery, spoke to me at that point of time. I could relate with him more than I could relate with anybody, and I try and offer the same empathy and support to somebody who's trying to stay off drugs for the first few months, few days, whatever.
And did your understanding of your relationship with yourself or relationship with related to God faith, spirituality change before and after this journey?
Well, this is again a difficult, particularly for me, because I I still am an atheist. There is no version of this where can say I suddenly believe in God. But uh, I had to figure out my way of spirituality, because basically I had to come up with ways of defining the world which is something else apart from me, because my self-centeredness and selfishness made me think that the whole entire universe revolved around me, and I had to break from that thought pattern. And I don't know if you can call it spiritual, but you slowly become aware of everything else around you, and you're just a speck of dust in this whole wide world. So that took some amount of realization for me to happen, because I did not have uh, the mechanism or the means or the vehicle of finding God through whatever that means for everybody. But I did not. I still don't. I am
It's
hardcore
still
atheist.
a humbling experience for you.
It is. It was. It was still an humbling experience, because finally you can see the world with clear eyes and figure out that you are again just one small creature in this whole wide world.
Any particular wild incident that you can recall that you,
During using,
yeah.
oh wow, there must be several. So, well, as far as I remember, I was in another city and I was kicked out from wherever I was staying. I still had the job, I think, and I ended up staying at a homeless person's tent beside a railway station for a
Oh, wow.
few days. That person was my friend, and he couldn't walk. He would crawl across the railway tracks. He would crawl because I think his feet were busted or something, and he was an addict like me. And there was a period where me, him, and one other guy, I think, we were contemplating robbing a bank.
Oh my God.
It is extremely funny because physically, just with the physical strength of it was not there to rob an old lady even, and we were talking
Right.
about robbing a bank, and that narrative was so real to us. We really believed it so much that after smoking up drugs, we could not even open our eyes. But I remember we were on the pavement opposite one of the banks and trying to figure out how we were actually going to rob the bank. We did not know how, but we were there watching everything.
Right.
And that is a narrative we believed. And I'm glad it did not happen, because I would have been in jail or something. But funny incidents like this were quite a bit funny and horrific, all of it.
Horrific, yeah, of course. So, what would you say to your struggling younger version of yourself?
Huh, nothing really, because nothing I would say would make sense to him. It didn't make sense to me, because a lot of people tried and talked sense to me, but nothing really did. It was just extremely lucky that I got clean. A lot of people did not, and like I said, I know people who are actually dead. So it's not funny.
So, if addiction is a story of losing yourself, what has the journey of recovery taught you about finding yourself, reducing that arrogance, and finding yourself again, basically?
Yeah, the arrogance was, I don't know if it was so much prevalent in me. It was more denial, which may have come across as arrogance. But this journey has been good. That I can sleep peacefully without having to worry about drugs. Because ultimately, when you compare the now to the day I was on the last day of using, a lot has changed. And I remember the day before I cleaned up, I went to a friend's place with my drugs, and this guy was obviously a bit senior to me, quite some few years senior in terms of years, his age, as well as in the number of years he was using drugs, and he was on his last breath. So I went to his house and I could not smoke up because he was like a fish out of water. He was gasping for air and he could not use, and I could not use. I ran away. I went home and I smoked up. The day I got clean is the day he died. And I got to know that I think around 3-4 months later that he died. So I'm just, I don't know if I can use the word blessed, but yeah, some feeling like that. It's extremely miraculous that I'm alive and I have life. And I wish the same for everybody who is like me, struggling to find sense of it all.
These days, drugs is more prevalent. It is more accessible to more number of young guys, young boys, and girls and boys both, rather. So, what is your message to them? I know you don't believe in preaching, but what is your general message to the current generation of college goers or vulnerable sections?
Well, there's no message. It's too much of a cliche to say don't use drugs, don't do drugs, stuff. I mean, it's part of growing up. I did it. Experimental gateway drugs, party drugs, whatnot. The drugs is not the problem. People do it. I have friends who did it and now they don't do it. But they're probably social drinkers or maybe have a drink in the evening after work. So there is no rule that anybody who does that is going to end up like me. But some do. I mean, but that's a beautiful part of your life, growing up, college. I'm not going to say it's legal to do drugs or something. I'm not saying that, but it is a part of growing up, and it everybody's life. You get a lot of good memories because of that. So there is no
Yeah, I
message.
think just being aware maybe helps people figure things out better.
It did not to me because I think I was aware. I knew exactly about what drugs are and what they would do to me if I let it get its hold of me. I knew that and I did it
And
either way.
yeah. All right, we'll wrap it up here. This was quite a revealing experience talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode. So, as we close today's episode, remember this: the greatest battle of addiction is often invisible. It is not fought in courtrooms or hospitals, it is fought in the quiet moments inside a person's own mind. Governments can do something to decriminalize this act. Communities can embrace harm reduction. Schools can educate to create awareness. Families can replace shame with understanding. We can also try and make at least drugs less accessible, treatment more available or affordable rather, and conversations about mental health more honest. All of these matter. But recovery is also deeply personal. No law, no therapist, no loved one can make that decision for someone else. The choice to confront pain instead of numbing it, to ask for help instead of hiding, and to begin again even after falling is a step only the individual can take. Yet perhaps there is another question worth asking. What kind of world are we building if so many people feel that their greatest relief comes from escaping it? Can we create homes where vulnerability is not mistaken for weakness? Can we create schools where success is not measured only by grades, or workplaces where burnout is not worn like a badge of honor? Can we create communities where loneliness is not hidden behind a smile? Can we teach children that asking for help is a strength, not a sign of vulnerability, and give adults permission to be imperfect without feeling judged? Because when reality becomes nothing more than relentless pressure and isolation or silent suffering, escape begins to look less like a temptation and more like a refuge. So, if we can make everyday life a little more hopeful, perhaps fewer people will feel the need to seek an altered state of mind just to make it through another day. Give it a thought, and until next time, take care of one another and of yourselves. Bye bye.